Fire Emblem Engage, the newest entry that has cemented itself as one of my favorites in the series. The most prominent and centric feature of this game's narrative and gameplay are the emblem rings. Beyond the standard buffs by wearing the ring, your units can engage to combine with the worn emblem and become incredibly powerful for a few turns. Which, you know, sounds great and alright, I'll admit it. I'm scared. I'm still so young, I'm not ready for this kind of commitment. Like a whole 3 turns? I'm a free spirit, I can't be shackled down by an engagement, you know? So, in a maddening classic file with random growths, can I beat Fire Emblem Engage with no engages? No! I can't. The prologue requires it, and it counts towards the achievement. Stupid prologue, it's not even real, none of it even happened. Can I beat Fire Emblem Engage with only 1 engage? Rising from 1,000 years ago, Alir wakes up to Clan and Fram over her body, and realizes that they have drawn on her face and dyed her hair funny colors during her slumber. Furious, she grabs Vander to help discipline these twin pranksters, but by the time we reach the two, they have already been confronted by other victims of their antics, who have had masks superglued to their faces. While sadistically pleasing to watch, it would be more cathartic for us to punish them, so we rush to their aid, retaining their asses for us to kick ourselves. I send my units into the thickets and funnel all the EXP I can into Alir. Amidst the bombardment, she somehow misses a 98% chance to hit, just like how 98% of you are somehow not subscribed. Absolutely mind-boggling. Just when the situation gets grim, Alir summons Emblem Marth from the Ring of the Hero King and uses this newfound power to clean up the map. By wearing an emblem ring, a character syncs with the emblem, gaining passive stat bonuses and access to that emblem's sync skills. This will be the extent of the emblem ring's utility throughout the run since I can't engage. That said, you can still engage with this video. Actually though. Eventually, Alir's mother comes downstairs to quell the ruckus and takes us home to do our chores, which is to tend to the garden while scuffling with Lumera and the landscapers for their own amusement. We get introduced to Breaks, this game's take on the weapon triangle that prevents counterattacks, and Chain Guards, an ability exclusive to full health Chi Adept units, allowing them to block an attack from an adjacent ally at the cost of 1/5 of their HP. After receiving a Sizzle Swing Slice, Lumera calls for more landscapers and dons the Ring of the Holy Knight to summon Shingard. We are intended to utilize Marth's Engage weapon, Rapier, for effective damage against the Cavaliers, but since that's obviously off the table, I'll have to deal with them in another way. Or not at all, it turns out, because Lumera engages with Sigurd and gallops in to doink Fran. I don't have the offensive profile to take her down in a single turn, so I put my units in defensive formation to bait Lumera into using Sigurd's Rider's Bane on Vander, depleting her HP enough to be swiftly taken down on player phase. Obviously, the lesson learned in this battle is that engaging with emblems bestows a false sense of security and is simply a tactical failure. In addition to this knowledge, Lumera gifts Alir with a ring, which is purely ornamental, and the sword Liberation, which arguably is also ornamental. After getting a flashback to Alir's Arsonist emo phase, we awaken to hostilities. Of the Chapter 3 variety. An unknown force invades the castle, and our goal is to rout the enemies that bar us from the Ring Vault. At the start of turn 2, we are reinforced by the Pyrenees. Etier can score perfect kills against this chapter's flyers. Boucheron is a backup class, which enables him to participate in chain attacks, and Alfred is our first lance unit, a niche he has that surely won't get superseded in the next chapter. Once we reach the boss's posse, I send Vander to block the center, so Clan can safely fire a beam while the rest lay off her underlings. We get to the Ring Vault and confront the hooded 5'2" invader, but she teleports into a higher quality cutscene, a calamitous omen to a powerful attack. You know, we haven't seen Mom recently. It sure would suck if she were to, swoop in and take the blow for us. Ooh, yeah, that is unfortunate. In Chapter 4, Alir begins her Divine Dragon fetch quest by going to the country of Firene, home to such beautiful attractions like bountiful orchards, acres of flowers, and village pillages orchestrated by Bell Dragon-endorsed combat zombies. Here we meet Celine, a solid mage who bears Emblem Celica's ring, Louis, arguably one of the best units in all of Fire Emblem, and Chloe, a flyer who caught my attention in the initial trailer because she managed to deal 42 damage with a slim plants. Why were stats like that? The only challenge this map presents is having Louis and Chloe separated from the main group. But even without engage abilities to expedite the process, I trailblaze forward whilst keeping the rear intact until we all gather for a barbecue. This attracts a number of people, such as laborers for our Sky Fortress and Vale, but she quickly leaves as she is in violation of our strict no shoes, no service policy. Before getting into Chapter 5, I stopped by the Somniel and received the DLC items, including the Fire Emblem Heroes bonus. While I am forced to live with the shame of publicly branding myself as a Fae player, the Askern Trio's weapons and bond rings are quite the boon. While we're here, Alir can also do some push-ups for a free +2 strength before every battle. Firenze Castle has been invaded by Elusian forces, led by Neluche and Zephia. Once Alir ties up her boots, our army begins to take back the castle, going on the offensive on the first 2 packs of enemies. I have to gain as much ground as possible to clear the left corridor and reach the thief for his stuff. Vander inspects the wall for any spoils the thief may have hid, but he only finds aggressive reinforcements. I lure them single file in the corridor, using Louis to do Louis things by protecting the rest of the cast. With some careful baiting, the boss arrives without much of his crew left, allowing me to completely surround him. I am particularly cautious because he has a strawberry-flavored gusher, a staple of bosses from henceforth that grant additional HP bars. But it's all for naught, as we retake the castle and actually manage to protect the maternal figure. In Chapter 6, we follow Queen Ed's directions to the shrine containing the Ring of the Dawn Maiden, and run into Yunaka, a poor girl who had star stickers put all over her face and hair during a sleepover. Sympathetic to her plight, Alir vows to help Yunaka get revenge on these perpetrators. This is a somewhat sluggish Fog of War map. As my main group moves carefully so as not to get punked by the darkness, Alir and Yunaka split off to jump a guy and summon Emblem Micaiah. Yunaka's quite the force as a thief, getting double the terrain avoid bonus and access to 1 to 2 ranged knives. While Micaiah's utility is quite neutered without engaging with her, she still allows her ring bearer to wield staves. Everyone finally reconvenes, which includes the boss. Fortunately, a warm body and an icy obstruct is sufficient to make Tyrande sit still and take his beating. Before we take our newly adopted dogs back home to sniff out some more ingots, we run into Vale yet again, who has sprained her ankle while practicing the Kamehameha technique. So we patch her up and get a close-up on her feet. This clearly is a necessary and well-executed storytelling device, and absolutely not anything with ulterior motives or fetishes whatsoever. No, you are the one getting defensive. In Chapter 7, we migrate to Brodia for our ring collecting journey. When we cross the border, Alir is met with an archer and 2 new characters. Claude, alongside Edelgard and Dimitri. They are the only freebie emblem bracelet I get in the sense that I don't need to beat a Paralogue for it, but they still offer great power and utility. This is a bridge map, which triggers my post-Telia stress disorder, but Eliosian bridges are far more structurally sound and pitch-free. Elusia's second princess, Hortensia, has seized control of the bridge and has a dark emblem at her disposal. Getting to her is not much of an issue thanks to the 3 other new characters, Alchrist, an extremely adept archer, and his 2 retainers, Lapis and Citrine. The only enemies left are linked to Hortensia, who wants to flex on my challenge by using Lucina's engage attack against me, but she doesn't have much muscle to flex. As such, she's much lighter than I expected, and I accidentally launch her into the stratosphere along with Lucina's ring. Shucks. In Chapter 8, Alchrist brings us to Brodia Castle to display his country's proud collection of redheads. Unfortunately, everyone's bright, multicolored hair creates an airplane runway that invites Princess Ivy and her Elusian forces to invade. After sending King Morion to go sit in a corner, we begin the map where we must twiddle our thumbs and wait until Ivy gets bored and advances. We get Amber, whose best quality is coming with good lances to give to other units, and Diamant, who has Emblem Roy but is not too remarkable. While Alchrist fiddles with the ballista, I ball everyone up in the middle and brace against all the enemies. Ivy and Emblem Leaf finally fly into my units for a beating. Learning from the last chapter, I ensured my units lace their weapons with butter, making Leaf's ring slip off Ivy's finger for our taking. As Ivy is defeated, but can't fall here, King Morion has been challenged to combat by Elusia's King Hyacinth, a scheming ruler and renowned Lin simp who keeps her ring in his personal chambers and collects her PNGs in Fire Emblem Heroes. This is obviously a trap, but despite Diamant grounding his father, he rebels and heads for the border. So, with 6 emblem rings now in our possession, we rush to his rescue as fast as possible. But, I gotta pick up the kids first. Before heading out, I'd do some housekeeping and collect a number of good S-rank bond rings. While it's up to chance what rings you get, I can save beforehand and change what rings appear by entering and exiting a battle until I get what I want. Deirdre's Renewal allows Fram to chain card constantly. Lilina's Raging Fire nets me greater fire damage. Deek's Strong Arm gives smash weapons greater accuracy. And, arguably the best one, Olwen's Dire Thunder grants Thunder Tomes the Brave effect. Now that I've prepared optimally, I head out to John's Paralogue, where the corrupted— oh, I beat it already. Alright then. The next child we enlist in our war effort is Tiki, but unlike Edelgard, paying $30 for the expansion pass is alone not sufficient to swear to our side, so I instead must earn her allegiance through brute force. This map can get dicey due to icy wyverns that ignore defenses and frost tiles that increase movement. Without burst options via engaging, I take a safe approach by spawn camping all 8 waves of reinforcements, using effective bow damage to shoot down the phantom wyverns, and body blocking any stragglers that couldn't be felled in a single player phase to protect my frail units. Once the reinforcements are exhausted, I leisurely advance at my own pace, snagging the silver card with rewarp and dispelling the ice barriers. After I thin out Tiki's room by counterattacking the phantom wyvern, I release them and hide in the upper left chamber, using Renewal and Chain Guards to endure in total safety and bring Tiki down. Last on our list is Anna, who finds herself between a bunch of bandits and a hard place. I fear I cannot reach her in time with normal movement, so I use the Warp Staff from Tiki's Paralogue and have Louis body block and prevent Anna from getting revealed. With her safety ensured, I finish the map and have successfully gathered the Triforce of Engage's children characters: Power, Utility, and Benchwarming. Meanwhile, in Chapter 9, Brodia and Elusia clash, and Morian appears to have the upper hand. But with the power of the Fey Pass subscription, Hyacinth rallies and uses his +10 merged Brave Lyn to take Morian down. We must save the Brodian King from being dragged off, but Ivy stands in our way. Kagetsu and Zelkov are sent to the northern and southern forts to trigger reinforcements and form a pincer attack. Zelkov is met with Louis' Leaf Engraved Steel Greatlance, and Kagetsu is neutralized with Obstruct, since his AI is focused on reaching the fort and will not attack, making him a sitting duck. With all the armored knights handled, including Jade, who gets recruited, Ivy is left alone to get bullied until the chapter ends. In Chapter 10, we rush to Destinia Cathedral, but we are too late, as Morian's essence has been turned into a combat manual to feed to the fell dragon Sombron, and has become one of the corrupted. With escape no longer an option, Alir and co resolve to fight. I immediately flex Chloe's new Cancer ability to remove the mage on the magic artillery, but I come to realize she's unable to elude Hortensia's free staff range, which makes all the enemies aggressive far sooner than is desirable. While Louis can single-handedly stonewall and annihilate the eastern front, I scramble to stabilize on the left, with some smart play and getting bailed out with Dire Thunder. Hortensia has holed herself up on the magic artillery, which grants me the much-needed breathing room to clean up the other enemies. Once she's out of shots and flies in, I take out my frustration of making this map harder than I needed it to be, and take her pride and worn-out free staff. After I finish recuperating, I bust down the door and fight Morian, because defeating the Kingdom of Might's ruler is an easy endeavor that seemingly anyone can and could do, and Hyacinth, after exhausting his Astrostorm, goes down much the same. Though we won the battle, we played right into the Fell Dragon's hands. We inadvertently tenderized Hyacinth to become a tasty snack for Sombron, and the hooded figure is revealed to be Vale with red eyes, Sombron's daughter, and seemingly the same Vale who we patched up before. The Four Hounds also show up, consisting of Dominic Toretto from the Fast and Furious franchise, the dictionary definition of the word masochism, a small girl fueled by bloodlust and praise, and a guy with a personal skill whose future allegiance remains totally inconspicuous. With all the pieces apparent, a cathedral, food, friends,
family,
the trap has been laid bare. This is a wedding, and Sombron wishes to tarnish the sanctity of this no-engage challenge. He takes our emblem rings and paints them in a sexy, irresistible red palette. Alir almost succumbs to her lust by dropping to her knees to propose, but Vander snaps her back to her senses, and we run away. Chapter 11 is a jarring change of pace for normal players, as they are suddenly stripped of their access to engage skills and attacks. For me, however, it's just a Tuesday. Alir needs to escape at the bottom of the map, so I rush ahead while strategically leaving Alchris behind. After taking out Marth, he can lay back and serve as a distraction to Micaiah and Sigurd, taking freezes and dodge-tanking attacks in the thicket courtesy of him being a covert unit. With Alchris' protection, the main group carves a path forward through the emblem-buffed Corrupted. Midway through, Vale takes all the rings back and deploys them to the 4 hounds to hunt us down, but Ivy and her retainers come to our aid along with the rings of Lyn and Lucina, giving us the final push to escape. In Chapter 12, the gang decides to take a break from the well-crafted storytelling and gameplay established in the last 2 chapters by taking a vacation in Solm. Right before succumbing to heatstroke, we are saved by Fogado, who offers to direct us to Solm Palace after he finishes saving some villagers from the Corrupted. This is a breather map, with only 7 deployment slots to make room for our new Solmic recruits. Fogado, who will remain a stable bow user, alongside Pandreo and Bunet. I have Chloe draw attention to herself to limit the Corrupted that go after the villagers. Minding the quicksand, I move in to protect the 3 green units and clear out all the enemies. Fogado escorts us to the palace, which we learn is his home, and takes us to his mother, Queen Sephoria. After Alir apprises her of the situation, she agrees to stand with us in our fight against the Fell Dragon by providing us an emblem ring, but oh, silly me, we seem to have misplaced the darn thing. Eventually, she recalls that her daughter Tamara took it with her camping, so we prepare to head out. Oh, sorry, I have the Nintendo Direct playing in the background. Wait, Fire Emblem Engage? More DLC emblems? Wave 2 released today? 3 new emblems are up for grabs by completing their respective divine paralogs. Unlike standard paralogs, these scale with your team's level, so I opt to save the more manageable map for EXP in the future, forget about one of them, and tackle Camilla's map now before the enemies become promoted. Camilla's paralog features dragon veins that alter the terrain, and infinite reinforcements that will soon have Void Curse. Without engaging, I have no means to lure Camilla and expedite the end of the map, and thus I must take the slow and arduous path to reach her. While Chloe hit and runs future packs of enemies, I take the opportunity to train up Mage Anna as I make for the bottom right. Forward progress is slow, but is made manageable due to my team's ironclad caboose, courtesy of Chloe corralling aggressive flyers and Louis doing Louis things. After a brisk 40 turns, we finally snake around to the top left and get Camilla into attacking range. With the dual strike skill from wearing Lucina's ring, any unit can chain attack, like a thief with poison applying knives. With efficient and convenient poison stacking, I can layer on additional true damage with my attacks, which is sufficient to take Camilla down. With that little escapade DLC out of the way, we return to Chapter 13, and using echolocation, manage to navigate our way to Tamara, but her meat song also attracts this game's iteration of the Bandit Twins. Amidst promotions among my ranks, I reclass Alir back into a unique class line for the dragon typing to get the most from Camilla's dragon bangs. The goal is to defeat the bosses, but the fog of war makes this a tedious task. Even with Emblem Ike, Tamara is not much of a standout combatant, but her retainers are. Panette is like a truck, and Marin is a swift and precise wolf knight, a class whose attire mandates a prosthetic tail. Tamara and Ike cleave a path through the junk so I can rush to save the rescue staff house, while Chloe and others hang back to fend off the flyers popping up out of the darkness. Once the bosses approach our group, I smash Tochi into a corridor and block him off with Alir, safely affording me an extra turn so I can feed both boss kills to Anna. With the battle concluded, Tamara and Fogado do away with the subterfuge and tell us of Solm's plan, revealing that they are actually extremely cunning and strong. See? Wasn't the combined 25 minutes of cutscenes and dialogue portraying Solm as overly carefree and naive all a fantastic build-up to this twist that Solm is acutely aware and they're just straight up better than everyone else? No? Oh. Huh. In Chapter 14, Tamara gets report of a terrorist attack in Solm Palace, so everyone rushes to the scene and discovers that the aggressor is Hortensia. She threatens to kill the queen unless we fork over all of our emblem rings, but, realizing she is just a 14-year-old girl undergoing loads of emotional turmoil, we simply point and laugh at her until her psyche completely shatters. Unfortunately, Zephyia shows up and takes advantage of Hortensia's weakened mental state, mind-controlling her and giving her evil red eyes. At the cost of some strength and some dignity by wearing a tail, Panette reclasses into a wolf knight in hopes that this will patch up her other stats. I split into two groups and jump the thieves before they have a chance to steal the treasure from me. From there, I wrap around to the center and prepare to take on the final room. By placing Marin in the pillars to draw aggro, I get the hounds to close in for a bum rush. Mavir is already weakened from the counterattack and is easily overwhelmed. Zephyr is cleaned up quite easily with critical hits from Annette and Alir, and Marnie's resistance is so low that a mere card trick has enough magical potency to defeat her. Last up is Hortensia, who introduces us to Great Flavored Gushers, which grant additional HP bars and unlocks more weapons or skills from their dark emblems, but it doesn't tip the scales for this battle. Thanks to our strategic bloodletting technique, Hortensia's blood red eyes are drained, and she returns to her senses and joins our forces alongside Emblem Byla. In Chapter 15, we arrive at the Northern Fortress to collect Solm's second emblem ring, and find it overrun with the corrupted who have targeted a dancer. Without any intervention, Seedal will literally die on turn 2, but booted up Alir can naturally reach him in time, recruiting him an Emblem Korin from the ring he was protecting. Our goal is to have Seedal escape, which is accomplished by defeating isolated rooms of enemies and using Dragon Veins to clear the miasma. Halfway through the map, two waves of jacked warriors with capped defenses will appear from behind, pressuring the player to complete the chapter quickly. However, I intentionally kept my units behind to fight them. I used Marin and Lucina to apply poison via chain attacks, then used swords and the Fracture Staff to break the first Killer Axe warrior to avoid suffering a counterattack. The other Killer Axe warrior attacks Alir, but she is safe thanks to Seedal using Chain Guard. A new wave of warriors with tomahawks appear, and I handle the right one in a similar fashion. Ivy and Marin soften up the Killer Axe warrior who remained from last turn, and Seedal dances for Alir to get another action to take him down. With the final warrior remaining, I block him off using Hortensia, and jump him on the subsequent player phase. Now that the soft time constraint has been removed, I stroll through the remainder of the map with ease, trapping the quote-unquote boss of the map, and getting Seedal out of here. Before finishing up Solm, I take a detour for a couple of paralogs. Completing an Emblem Ring paralog will unlock bond levels 11 through 20 for the respective emblem, granting greater stat bonuses and sync skills. My first stop is Lucina's paralog in order to access Dual Assist Plus, a skill I can inherit onto backup units that give them a 70% chance to join in for a chain attack against foes in their movement range. Lucina's paralog is based on Awakening's Arena Ferox map, so it's my low deployment against a smattering of enemies. Once Lucina is the only foe remaining, I bait her into wielding Parthia, rendering her unable to counterattack at one range. Reinforcements appear from the stairs, but I don't let them distract me as I cleave through Lucina's health bars and unlock her ring's full potential. Next, I return to the expansion pass and take on Soren's Divine Paralogue. If the game forcibly turning off staff animations is any indication, this map is quite a doozy. Chock full of enemies, debilitating smoke terrain that spreads every turn, volcanic bombs that strike certain areas of the map, enemies with fracture and physics staves, and, to top it all off, Soren has a 10-range bolting tome. With the exception of rushing to snag the rescue staff, I take it slow approaching Soren, waiting out the finite reinforcements and training up some of my weaker units. Alchrist has new utility, courtesy of Claude's S-rank Bond Ring, which grants bow range +1 when at full HP, thus letting him use his killer bow at 3 range. After trekking through walls of smoke and stupid enchanter effects that solely serve to spite me, I get into Soren's range and trigger his aggression. I exploit the AI's love and priority of engage attacks to ensure Soren puts himself in a poor position, allowing me to close in and easily tear through his flimsy defenses. In Chapter 16, Elusian warships set sail for Firene, but while on course, Hortensia's retainers flee with the Ring of the Azure Twins, so Marnie and Mavir turn back to Solm to reclaim it. Rosado and Goldmary find and align themselves with us to fend off their pursuers, and Alir summons Emblem Erica for Rosado to use. Rosado and Goldmary are not outstanding right out the box, but Goldmary starts as a level 3 hero, and will be very useful once she learns her class skill. This map's gimmick revolves around rising tides that stifle movement and can isolate units until the tides withdraw. I move aggressively with Chloe to take out the barbarian so the northwestern village remains unscathed, then hold the center to exhaust the reinforcements. With the scrubs out of the way, all that's left is to advance on the bosses. Marnie still lacks resistance, and Mavir's personal skill cannot protect him from defeat. As Alir's group rushes to Firene, we cut to Dom Toretto's ship, talking about family. Not Red-Eyed Veil reveals that she has her sister's intact Dragonstone from 1,000 years ago, which indicates that she is still alive. But who could the sibling be? I just can't seem to connect these dots and solve this mystery. In Chapter 17, we arrive just in time for Flora Port's Great Burning Festival, a beautiful melding of cultures where Illugia sets Fiorne's homes and farmland ablaze. Everyone gathers for the festivities, but Vale finds this incineration of innocent civilians abhorrent. However, in a shocking revelation, Dom reveals that there are two Vale personas, the innocent and real purple-eyed Vale that Alir befriended, and the mind-controlled and evil red-eyed Vale that creates the corrupted and leads the Fell Dragon's army. These two versions of Vale both reside in a single body, and Dom has awakened E-Vale once again, and the battle begins. We must defeat all 6 commanders wielding Dark Emblem Rings: Vale, the 4 Hounds, and Corrupted Hyacinth. Unfortunately, his old Fire Emblem Heroes account with all his wins got suspended after his death, so he had to restart and only has a 3-star leaf. My first target is Grissom Celica, so I clear a path north and get him a Dark Warp to Anna to isolate himself from the other enemies. I reward his acquiescence to my whims with a boatload of pain. I continue north to exterminate the enemies, because I may use the area as a refuge point as the battle progresses. As I do that, a corrupted worm slowly inches up on me. They only have 2 movement, but deal penetrating damage at up to 4 range, so it's imperative that I handle it before it lays waste to a weaker unit. With my rear all clear, I swing back around and prepare to confront Marnie and Mavir's retinue. I use Ike's reposition to move Ivy into the bottom left and obliterate a general. This lures Marnie away from the rest of her group, which gets taken down on player phase. Panette repositions Ivy back to safety, and Chloe takes out Mavir's Royal Knights, leaving just the 2 Hounds. I put Marin in position to chain attack both of them, and set my sights on Marnie. Her speed and resistance are still laughable, but Emblem Roy bestows her Holdout Plus, which guarantees she survives if she enters combat with at least 20% of her HP. She's still trivial to defeat, but I had to use 4 actions to deplete both health bars, and thus leaves less wiggle room to defeat Mavir this turn. Fortunately, Marin's chain attacks stack 3 levels of poison, and a critical hit from Alchrist takes his first health bar down, making it easy for Alir and Panette to finish the job. With 3 Hounds put down, I prepare to take on the final group. I retreat to the bottom right with everyone but Chloe, who stays back to trigger the enemies to move. First up will be Dom, speeding towards us with 12 movement and seeking vengeance for her fellow Hounds. Knowing that she'll override, I have my units placed in a way that traps her so she can't canter away, and since she's so far ahead of everyone else, I can easily beat her into submission. Due to my positioning, Hyacinth and Vale actually split up, which allows me to handle them separately. The flames restrict Hyacinth's movement to be akin to his favorite game, Fire Emblem Heroes, so since he's sufficiently restrained, I decide to take Vale on first. I'd rather not be on the receiving end of her Mars Lodestar rush, so I use Marin to counterattack at 2 range, and my units beat her up on the subsequent player phase before she can do anything threatening. This just leaves Hyacinth, but the flames make it a bit awkward to reach him immediately. I use Obstruct to prevent the worm from getting closer, and wait until Hyacinth reaches my group. I play with him a bit and manage to get Gold Mary to level 5, unlocking the hero class skill Brave Assist. When at full health, she will perform 2 chain attacks. Coupled with Dual Assist Plus, she can help other units pile on damage and potentially cinch a kill just by being fielded. Anyway, Corrupted Hyacinth dies, and we take back Emblem Leaf's ring, who's been tossed around like a hot potato throughout the story, as this marks the 4th time he's been taken. Speaking of hot potato, the Hounds in E-Vale play hot potato with the remaining emblem rings to take their minds off their terrible loss in this battle. During the game, normal Vale switches back from E-Vale and throws Sigurd's ring to Alir, not realizing that only the people on the ship were playing, and Alir wasn't part of their game. At the cost of Vale getting slapped and scolded, we now have 8 out of the 12 emblem rings. Starting with this chapter and onwards, the story chapters will actually be quite concerning in difficulty, since they are designed with our numerous emblem rings in mind, and the game expects us to use engage abilities to turn the tides of battle in our favor. In lieu of engaging, we're gonna have to draw power from the emblem rings in other regards. I first go to Lynn's Paralogue. Bagato has been the prime Lynn bearer to utilize Speed Taker in order to double flyers with his Radiant Bow, but the reason I'm putting myself through this is for Alchrist to inherit Bow Focus 5, bolstering bow accuracy to ensure his shots hit and make the most out of his extended killer bow. This map is based on Sakai from the Binding Blade, which doesn't bode well for me. My units begin in a scattered formation, and the map is teeming with bow knights just itching to kill my flyers and weak units. The right side does fine advancing up and taking down the tent captains, but the left side struggles. Louis is indestructible and takes 0 damage, but due to maddening AI, the enemies ignore him and go for the more destructible members of my army. I manage to take out everyone minus those near Lyn, so I brace against the enemies at the bridge until the opportunity to reach and defeat Lyn presents itself, and I can finally leave Sakai. Next up is Ike's Paralogue. Panette has been using him, and I'd like to unlock Wrath to add to her existing high critical chance, with her personal skill and Killer Axe. This battle can get overwhelming fast, but unlike the source material this map is based on, I don't need to defend, so instead I head left and waltz right up to Ike. He's quite tanky, and is considered an armored unit based on his muscles alone, but poison and magic pierce through his defenses, and his max bond level is achieved. Last one on the docket is Sigurd's Paralogue. Unlike the previous 2 Paralogues, I'm not after a particular skill for a build, but getting all the benefits of max bond level will be nice for Louis and enhances power and utility. This is a pretty painless map, so long as I mind the impairing staves and don't overextend. There are 2 jacked sages with capped stats at the bottom left. I can only assume this is a reference to something in genealogy, but despite my ignorance, I fight them regardless. I set Bane of Succor with Alir and Camilla, then bait out the Thoron one with Alchrist, who can safely retaliate thanks to Seedall protecting him with Chain Guard. The glow tile heals Seedall back to full, so I step back and have Alchrist and Seedall do the same exact thing. Chloe swoops in to finish off the Thoron Sage's final HP bar, which just leaves the Bolganone Sage's 4 health bars against the rest of my units. I use Alir and chain attacks to soften him up and have Marin take out the first health bar and activate Draconic Hex, a skill inherited from Emblem Corin that decreases an afflicted enemy's basic stats by 4. Draconic Hex combined with chain attacks and plus 5 true damage per hit for maximum poison stacking will be the standard combo to fell tough bosses in the future. In comparison, the remaining enemies on this side are a joke, and we lower the bridge to a bunch of reinforcements that we don't have to fight because Sigurd charges ahead. I organize my units and create the same override trap I made in Chapter 17, then proceed to beat the snot out of him and burn him to a crisp, which is a reference to genealogy that I do know. In Chapter 18, the squad set sails to Elusia, but is obstructed mid-voyage by Elusian forces led by Abeam, who was the boss of Chapter 3 that lived? Huh, damn, Rodina and Elusia could never. Way to go, Abeam, we stan a queen. This is a battle on 4 fronts, a boat of enemies east and west, and a pack of flyers north and south. Alir is capable of one-rounding the northern Wyvern Knights with a Wormslayer, and I focus on forcibly grounding all the flyers. Once I clear the skies with relative ease, I shift focus to the boats, fending off the enemies who have breached my ship, and using Edelgard's Flame Gambit and the boat's Flame Cannon to block off the adjacent vessels. To get a bit more elbow room, I send Chloe to defeat the Magic Artillery Sage on the left, and get Hortensia to bail her out. However, I want the speed wing that the thief stole, so I charge Chloe back into the fray. Things get hairy, but she accomplishes her mission and gets rescued out of danger. With the enemy numbers thinned out and Lyndon recruited, I bid Abeam adieu for the final time. In Chapter 19, we dock at Keeper Port and receive a welcoming party comprised of the Corrupted and our 2 favorite hounds, who made the place festive with miasma tiles that the game chugs to load in. The miasma is a pain, but the flame cannons can clear them up and hinder enemy movement. Or it would, if not for Mavir's Micaiah augmented warp staff, capable of sending multiple units 10 spaces away. With Saphir as an additional warm body under my command, I body block the central row to prevent Mavir from warping any foes behind my units. Once the warp staff breaks, I maintain the defensive line in the center and use my other units to fend off the enemies that have crawled onto the pier. As reinforcements pour in and wrap themselves around Mavir, I patiently draw out the enemies in range and wait until Marnie and Mavir become aggressive. Meanwhile, I ensure the worms close in on the 2 other rows and completely cut them off with obstructs. By turn 15, Mavir starts moving, but so do Marnie and the 11 others. Mavir isn't an issue, but the opposing Death Ball is quite threatening, so I use the final Flame Cannon shot to protect my units for a turn. Considering that Marnie has Holdout ++, the enemy's positions are a bit too awkward for my liking to be able to end the map now, so I clear out the enemies and contain Marnie for a clean turn to defeat her, and take back the rings from Micaiah and Roy. I take one final detour and tackle Micaiah's Paralogue. Beating it will net me Staff Mastery 5, a skill I will inherit with Hortensia that increases her healing potency and, more importantly, bolsters accuracy for impairing stabs like Freeze or Entrap. Hordes of enemies and reinforcements that I cannot handle will charge at me at once, thus my only solution is to defeat Micaiah quickly. She won't move until attacked, which could be accomplished with a super long-range Aster Storm by engaging with Lyn. Since that is not an option, I come up with an alternative solution by giving Claude's ring with Wind God to Figado and setting up the Elysian Princesses for some shenanigans. I begin by having Ivy rescue Figado over the wall, closing the distance so we can shoot at Micaiah from 4 range with a Wind God buffed longbow. Micaiah is successfully aggroed, but I would like to keep Figado, so I shmove Hortensia in with a combination of reposition and dance and use her rescue staff to return him to safety. As my units fall back, I use the flame cannon and Camilla's vein of smoke to interfere with enemy movement until Micaiah reaches my group. Summoning the spirit and strength of Radiant Dawn enemies, I overpower Micaiah without much fuss, and I can now set my sights to beat the game. In Chapter 20, while Marnie and Mavir receive punishment by fire since they lost their rings, Alir is busy getting swole. By earning SS rank or better in expert push-ups, she receives a temporary +3 strength boost for the next battle, which is superior to a strength tonics +2. Afterwards, we book it to Elusia Castle, but it's dark since no one has bothered to pay the electricity bill. The map begins with Gris and Celica warping to a dark corner to surprise us, but I turn the tables by finding him immediately and kicking his teeth in. Unfortunately for me, he whimpers away, and now begins the actual map where I must traverse the Fog of War and reach him. Progress is made difficult by the Entrap Staff user in the center. Instead of unwillingly getting teleported to them, I willingly warp Louis in, and one-shot the guide to take the Entrap Staff for myself, and use Hortensia to get Louis away from the Mage Knights. My units are split in order to handle the oncoming waves of enemies on both sides, accomplished with staggering offense on the left and hindering smoke terrain on the right. While Ulchrist fights for his life in a dangerous situation I did not need to put him into, 2 thieves on opposite ends of the map have stolen treasure and prepared to make their escape. The left one isn't worth the risk or effort to stop, so I charge everyone right and bludgeon the thief for a brave bow and secret book. I am forced to play defensively once again until I am sure the aggressive enemies have been taken care of, so I can advance on Gris. Once he moves in, I use my 3-range units to outrange him to not die from an unholy stance and a counterattack, then send Panette in to finish the job and reclaim Celica's ring. When Alir uses an invocation to resummon Emblem Celica to our side, Gris starts laughing maniacally as he has uncovered the truth about Alir. Divine Dragons pray to summon emblems, and since Alir uses Fell Dragon invocations, this can only mean that Alir is... In Chapter 21, after coming to terms with being the child of the Fell Dragon, Alir is approached by Mavir. With it now being clear that Alir is Vale's long-lost sister, he wishes to take us to Vale and save her from becoming Eve Vale forever. While sailing to Lethos, we pass the time by establishing exposition and airing out everyone's tragic backstories. Marnie goes on a long soliloquy explaining all of her past, almost as if this is her final opportunity to do so. Once we arrive, Marnie returns to the rest of the Hounds, and is revealed that Eve Vale has completely taken over due to the plot-convenient helmet that magnifies Dom's mind control magic. Swayed by Vale's tragic backstory, Marnie defects from the Hounds and attempts to save Vale. This is great! Having another physical wall besides Louis will be a fantastic addition to the team. Oh. Guess she didn't hold out. This is a grueling battle where I must survive against waves of enemies and reinforcements before I have the opportunity to move up to the bosses. I take refuge on the left, allowing me to spawn camp the bottom left reinforcements and fend off foes, while Lear is on crowd control duty with Vein of Smoke. Mavir's here. He's not really good because the Royal Knight class kinda stinks, but he is an additional action at my disposal that can also use staves. The worm and reinforcements from the right have finally reached me, so I punch through to the center and freeze the outlier hero I couldn't kill right away. After I stabilize, Gris rewards my efforts by hand-delivering me some spirit dust, and I set Ulchrist up to crit Dom and draw in the rest of her group and the nearby worm. Her retinue gets shot down easily, and a couple of critical hits manage to take out the worm and Dom. While I clean up the remaining stragglers, I ponder how to approach Vale while accounting for the giant protection tile and the trap staff user. In anticipation of this final group, I temporarily made Marin hang up her tail to become a thief and reap the benefits of being a covert unit. The plan was for Marin to be entrapped onto the protection tile, have her dodge tank through enemy phase, then rush everyone in after her, but none of that happens because Entrapped missed. Vale and Co don't move, and the reinforcements are triggered, but I think I can make this work. Alchrist removes the Entrap Staff guy, Hortensia hits freeze on Vale and the Corrupted Worm after a dance, and I use magic to eviscerate the generals. With them out of the equation, Anna applies Soren's assigned decoy on Marin, which breaks Maddening AI and forces foes to attack her even with a 0% chance to hit, which grants protection for the more susceptible members of my army. Alir's Vein of Smoke plus Marin's Draconic Hex offset her high avoidance and make her extremely weak, allowing my units the opportunity to hit Vale with a Frying Pan, and by cartoon logic, switches her personality back to being normal Vale. She hands Alir Marth's emblem ring, but Daddy gets mad and prepares to punish Vale. Alir steps in front to protect her little sister, but she doesn't have enough rings to survive the attack, promptly dies. Sombron then takes the emblem rings and uses their power to rise the flooded land of Gradlon and open an interdimensional portal. Unfortunately, all members of my army were distracted by Sombron's light show, which gives Dom the chance to use her mind control magic and makes Vale return, who summons a bunch of Corrupted to finish off my army. Meanwhile, in Chapter 22, Alir finds herself in a post-mortem dream world. As she reflects on her regrets and misfortune, Vale appears as she is dead on a technicality since Vale took over her body. After discussing their shared daddy issues, they decide Sombron is due for an ass whooping, so they concoct a plan to return to the land of the living. Since the enchanted helmet is damaged, Vale can generate enough mental fortitude to reclaim her body from Vale, but Alir is just actually dead, so Vale uses her dragon powers to revive her as one of the Corrupted. Starting with Marth, our goal is to locate and resummon all 12 emblem rings. Since Alir was revived with Fell Dragon energy, her summoning is infused with the same power, making these dark emblems that we cannot engage with, but that is of zero consequence to me in this no engage challenge. I take this map slow and steady, remaining in the starting area to fend off reinforcements from behind, and carefully aggro each pack of enemies so as not to get overwhelmed. Vale is the final character to join us, and is a nice addition to the squad. When Alir gets close enough to a cluster of emblem rings, she will summon them and enable my units to don or collect the rings. Even with the infinite reinforcements from the bottom, I progress through the map, getting the legendary Spear Brianak for Louis and summoning all of the emblem rings. But this process has drained Alir's corrupted body of its energy and she dies yet again. However, since I have not engaged with the emblems throughout the entire run, the rings still have some untapped energy, so they reward my army's celibacy by restoring Alir's life and making her an emblem. The Fire Emblem. Since this form and its abilities can only be accessed through using Engage Plus, by ordinance of this challenge, it is completely useless and inconsequential to me. In order to reach Sombron, we must destroy the 3 magic MacGuffins, each one having a unique map gimmick and being protected by Guardians. In Chapter 23, Vale sniffs out a shard, which is protected by Dom, Gris, and a bunch of free staff users. Before I began, I used a total of 13,000 bond fragments in the arena to get to bond level 7 with Sigurd, and inherited Headlong Rush for 200 SP a pop for all my units. Even though I can ignore opposing freeze staves, I still must endure this map's gimmick, volcanic bombs that damage anything under its shadow, including impassable rock terrain. All that is required is to defeat the bosses, but getting to them is easier said than done. The volcanic bombs will open paths for aggressive enemies, so any step forwards mandates 2 steps back. After a long and tedious slog of progression, the map eventually runs out of enemies to bog me down, and I finally reach Gris and Dom. Gris acts as the delivery man once again, and gives me the legendary Brave Tome, Nova, without any struggle. After getting Draconic Hexed by Marin, Dom gets chain attacked by the usual in addition to Hero Mavir, and Alir delivers one last critical hit to conquer our first shard. Unlike the previous 3 times we fought, the wounds they received are finally lethal. As a sign of respect to us and a sign of pettiness against Sombron, Dom gives us a magic charm in order to reach the next Fell Dragon shard. As we leave to let them decompose into the volcanic rock, Dom realizes that the true family she always wanted was the Gris she met along the way, and they drive off into the distance. In Chapter 24, we use Dom's magic charm to get the next shard within reach. It sends us a millennium back in time, and we find ourselves face to face with past Alir, before she was adopted and bestowed divinity by Lumera. Past Alir challenges Alir to a Marth duel, where the victor claims the magic MacGuffin. This map has a 15-turn time limit and the semi-frequent avalanche that knocks all my units back in the highlighted row. I converge all units to the center row and make my advance there. While I can dodge the avalanches, I am unable to evade the enemies on the other rows, so I must block or fight them off lest they seep through and kill my units. As the turns pass by, Pastelier aims an avalanche towards the middle, and I intend to bear it. Some units can fly or sidestep out of the danger range, and the remainder line up with the boulders or Vale and Corrin's Vein of Ice so they don't get pushed back to the beginning. Once I inch close enough in, Hortensia fires off an entrap on Pastelier, and it works thanks to Divine Pulse. Now that she's up close, I apply the maneuvers: poison stacking, Draconic Hex, a flurry of chain attacks, and a few clean hits. With Pastelier now history, the shard shatters, and I take the boots she was holding, which ostensibly was a gift for her barefooted sister. Just one MacGuffin remains before we can confront Sombron, and we're running out of story-important characters that still need closure. I mean, who's next? Mom? Wait, it's actually gonna be Mom, isn't it? In the penultimate chapter, we advance the Gradlon Temple and find that Lumera has been revived by Sombron as one of the corrupted to protect the final Fell Dragon Shard. Vale tries to shield Alir from Matricide by handling it herself, but she's unable to kill Lumera as easily as she did back in Chapter 3. Alir arrives and resists corrupted Lumera's maternal siren song, and this tumultuous struggle of a battle begins. The first hurdle is that my units are split into two sections, which is resolved with a plentiful amount of warp, rewarp, and rescue staves at my disposal in order to advance on the easier left side. Once the right side has been completely evacuated, I rapidly progress towards the center section and cleave through the enemies in the way, including corrupted worms, which have 2 health bars on this map. Every few turns, Lumera shoots a beam from the Fell Dragon Shard, which is more annoying than it is threatening. 2 thieves appear along with the start of infinite reinforcements. Take out the thief near me, but the other thief will open the right door if left to its own devices, which is not ideal as it will unleash all the enemies on that side of the map. To avoid enemies charging at me from both sides, I strategically position my staff users to execute my scheme. Anna hands Hortensia a free staff and warps her into the center. Hortensia freezes the thief, so it cannot unlock the door this turn. After cantering back, Hortensia is just in range for Mavier to rescue her into safety. While Vale and Corrin keep the reinforcements at bay with a variety of Dragon Banes, Alcris destroys the door, and I prepare to tackle the center next turn. Hortensia needs to freeze the thief again, but doesn't need all the teleportation shenanigans this time, as my units swell in and claim the center. Shockingly, with an inaccurate Dire Thunder and a lucky Grasping Void proc, Ivy zaps the right thief out of existence, and with the other 2 thieves handled, there are no more enemies capable of unlocking the other door or stealing the treasure. Most of my units remain on crowd control, but select Dispatch strikes north to eliminate the entrap staff user and begin to chip away at the immobile opposition. Once the upper chamber is clear enough, I send all my units up into safety, while Marin, Alir, and Fogado use their high avoidance, enhanced by Vein of Fog, to act as a buffer at the bottleneck and dodge tank the infinite reinforcements from below. Meanwhile, Louis begins his journey of clearing all the enemies surrounding Lumera. Starting with the left, he uses Brianak to assail the worm, and Cantor Plus's back to return to safety, or to be danced to go for seconds. With the worm gone, Mavier repositions Louis in order to reach and defeat the Martial Master, and after a meaty meteor, Louis gets an easy kill against the Sage. As I prepare to do the same thing on the right side, the reinforcements have all clogged up against my dodge wall, and I don't even bother trying to attack them. With treasure plundered and Lumera isolated, it's finally time to kick her ass. Thanks to Vale's Vein of Flame, the floor burns to earn a turn for my dodge tanks to adjourn as I commit to the point of no return. With debuffs from Vale and poison from Marin, Lumera has been greatly weakened, and Alir can enter combat twice with the dance and take down her final 2 health bars. After taking the Willy Glons, Alir puts Lumera into an eternal slumber, and with the final Fell Dragon Shard broken, all that's left is Sombron. In the final chapter of Fire Emblem Hold on, I need to adjust the name. Let's see, I can't engage, and I can't even use the Fire Emblem, so... In the final chapter of... We move the Somniel into the portal and find Sombron. He monologues that he is invading worlds in an attempt to reunite with Zero Emblem, the emblem of Foundations. This was an emblem from his original world that left him after blah blah blah, power of friendship, plus entrap staff, plus get debuff, plus L, plus ratio, GG's shake my hand. The true final battle begins as Soren transforms into a great fell dragon. His fell barrier plus nullifies damage while 4 dark emblems remain on the map, so I take down the shadow dragon and dark god and reduce his damage reduction to 70%. I head for the top left dark emblem, but getting there is rough as I am forced to fight a bunch of aggressive enemies. Ivy manages to take out the Warfather's first health bar and retreats to the skies in total safety. After some tribulations, the Warfather goes down, and Soren's damage reduction is only 50%. If I defeat the 4th dark emblem, the fell barrier will disappear for the remainder of the phase, but Soren will summon 4 new dark emblems with reinforcements and get a full fell barrier back, so I opt to fight Soren now. Poison still works on him, so I begin by having Panette counterattack with the legendary dagger I obtained in the last chapter. Vale inherited Anima Focus from Soren, which applies varying debuffs depending on the element used. The fire defense debuff stacks with Draconic Hex, resulting in an effective -7 defense and -4 to the others. Anna dons Soren's bracelet and casts Thoron, which triggers the thunder effect of -20 hit. His Bondbreaker skill reduces chain attack damage to 2 and accuracy to 30%, making them nigh useless. Speaking of, Camilla's Decisive Strike skill is usually useless, but it actually sees its first practical application ever. Neat. I use Delir first so units can attack adjacent to her to benefit from Divinely Inspiring, so their attacks get some added oomph. Thanks to a lucky chain attack hit from Marin, Twilight takes down Soren's first health bar, and he is successfully stacked with the maximum poison. I squeeze in as much damage as possible and end this player phase with Hortensia, who uses Fortify to heal my units so they can survive a whirling death. I employ the same debuffing strategy and manage to take the 2nd and 3rd health bar down. I am unable to finish him off now, so I run my units down to avoid the reinforcements coming at me. Griffin Knights attempt to protect Soren by healing him with physics staves, but those efforts were in vain as I have more than enough actions to deplete his HP and have Alir apply the finishing touch. Once we return home, all the emblems leave us because we did not engage with any of them, and thus have no commitment to settle down. After all the credits and ending scenes play, I save my post-completion save file and check the achievement board to verify there was only one time, from the prologue, that I engaged with an emblem, which completes this No Engage challenge. This was a neat way to experience the game, forcing you to play the maps in a more traditional manner without burst options, while retaining the fun toys to use in the form of sync skills, inheritance, and forging. And I have an even greater appreciation for this game's design. Just like the single time I was forced to engage, you should be compelled to engage with the video by leaving a like and comment, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this video with a friend or two. It really goes a long way, and will help me make quality content for Fire Emblem and other series and topics down the line. Or not quality material, like Fire Emblem Engage but everyone has self-destruct. I'm sure that's playable.